Hello, my name is Jennifer Shlomovich, and I am a vegan confidence coach. I specialize in helping vegans eliminate people pleasing so they can confidently be themselves and navigate the challenges of having a lifestyle different from the people around them. Here on my channel, The Confident Vegan, I share content on Tuesdays for Topic Tuesday, where I interview guests and share other personal development topics. On Fridays, I have Food Friday, where I share recipes and other food-related content. Today, my special guest is Dr. Marina De León. Dr. De León is a certified nutritionist who practiced sports massage and nutrition coaching for nearly 15 years in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. She owned and operated a therapeutic massage and nutrition consulting clinic that specialized in working with elite athletes that included ultramarathoners and Olympians. After receiving her PhD in microbiology from the University of California, Dr. De León opened a global remote nutrition consulting business focusing on gut microbiome health for individuals in all stages of life and wellness. She employs a holistic approach to nutrition, focusing on augmenting and supporting gut bacteria by using whole foods and earnest coaching methods to assist her clients in optimizing physical performance or healing from disease and health conditions. Welcome, Dr. De León.
Hi, thank you so much, Jennifer. And I just want to say, I really love your platform about being nonconformist. That's such a huge part of being vegan and staying vegan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I feel like it can be very hard and challenging when you're living a lifestyle different from everybody else around you. And it's so important to create a supportive space to help everyone. And I'm really excited to have you on today's episode because I feel like you're going to have so much valuable information to help that mission.
I hope so.
So the first question I ask my guests is, what is your vegan story?
Okay, well, are you ready for probably a pretty different story than a lot of people? Yeah, and thank you for asking that. Do you want me to start from the beginning? Like from the dawn of time?
You start from the dawn of time, absolutely, because I feel like what I've discovered is even though everyone might have different stories, there's usually similar themes that everyone can relate to. And I feel like from the very beginning, that's an important place to start.
Okay. Well, here we go. So I grew up in a really rural area. It was on a mountain. And my father hunted, and my mom made a lot of food from home, beans, lentils, brown rice, tofu. And so I grew up eating a lot of animals from the woods around me. And we also had some cows and some farm animals that my dad would kill and feed to us as well. So this was hard for me as a child. I never liked the idea of killing the animals around me in my environment and then eating them. I thought it was violent and just really unappealing. Like I loved going hunting with my dad in the woods, but only to be in the woods with my dad and see animals. It was always heartbreaking if he ended up killing something. Mm-hmm. But I ate meat and because it was what we had and I didn't think any differently. And then eventually, when I was a little bit older, my dad had killed some cows that we raised. Their names were Comet. They were male dairy cows because he would buy those because they were cheaper. He would raise them for meat. We would treat them like any other animal. They were treated like our horses, like our dogs and cats. We washed them in the summer. We brushed them. They had names. And then he would kill Comet. And I would ask my mom when we were eating dinner, when she was preparing food, is this Comet or did you buy this meat from the store? And my mom was always very honest. She would either say, yes, it's Comet, and then I wouldn't eat him. It was like a very weird, honestly, it's thinking back on it, it's like grotesque. But I would eat meat from the store if she brought home like beef and she would say, no, I bought this at the store, and then I would eat it. So psychologically, I think it was very conflicting and kind of damaging for me to kind of have that environment. And then when I was about 16, I just had this epiphany. I was in school and I opened up a Spanish book, and in the book, it had little pictures of animals, and it had a picture of a chicken. And I noticed that instead of saying gallina, it said pollo. And it had a picture of a cow, and instead of saying vaca, it said carne. And instead, it had fish, instead of saying pez, it said pescado. And I thought, wow, I was 16 years old, and I thought, these are euphemisms. This is not right. Like, I can't do this anymore. And I stopped eating meat immediately with that epiphany that what everybody else is doing, they're disassociating, and I can't dissociate myself like that. And so at 16, I stopped eating meat completely. I had already had some instances when I was younger where I had stopped eating certain animals. For example, Comet, I didn't eat him. My dad had been fishing one day. He was making me fish. And when I caught the fish, he then killed it. And I thought, oh my God, after this, I cannot eat fish. That was awful. Like, I just had the fish in the water swimming around. I caught it. He guts it. I was like, it was very violent to me always. And then a little bit after that, after I was 16 years old and I quit eating meat, I actually came across a Why Vegan pamphlet. The people that hand out Why
Mhm.
Vegans, they're all over the place. Somebody gave me one, or I picked one up from something, and I read it and I thought, yes, I need to go further. And that was just a little bit after becoming vegetarian on my own. And that's pretty much my story. There's a lot of probably other details, but since then I haven't eaten animal products. Um, and one thing that's really interesting to me that I'd like to note is I grew up very anemic, and I had chronic anemia and chronic bronchitis growing up. Those were my two kind of health issues. What's interesting is immediately becoming vegan, I never experienced anemia again. And I actually have only gotten sick in the past couple of decades a few times. Like, I can count them on my hand. So I think that's just an interesting, I don't know, coincidence.
There's so many things I want to say. Before I dive back to the beginning of what you shared, yeah, I feel like that is important to share how your health improved. I noticed for myself when I started eliminating dairy, like that's when I started to feel relief in areas that I didn't even know there was areas that I did feel not so great in, and then there was areas that I didn't even realize I wasn't feeling so great in until I started eliminating animal products. So yeah, I feel like those, it's important to listen to our bodies, and that's an important point to make because there's so much stigma around being vegan and, oh, you're not going to be healthy and you're going to be
Nutrient
anemic.
deficiencies.
Right. Meanwhile, a lot of the people who I know who switch to a vegan eating are feel much better and much healthier. I haven't met
Right.
anyone who has felt worse
Me
being
either.
vegan.
I
So
hear about those people on the internet, but I've never actually met
I
somebody
never
who
met
feels
them either.
worse.
Everyone tells
Yeah.
me they feel so much better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to go back to the beginning of your story and thank you for sharing that because there's a commonality in that. Most of us grew up in homes with that traditional meal of meat, a starch, your vegetables were on the side, but your main food was like fish or some kind of meat. And there is that disconnect because it's like I've always known what it was, but it's different when you actually see the animal living and then it's all of a sudden on your plate and then you have that realization of, oh my God, I'm eating Comet, like, and that must have been really, really awful to have those experiences. And again, it's that disconnect is something a lot of other vegans I've spoken to, we talk about that. We all have that. When we're young, we just do what our families teach us to do. We just follow
Hmm.
our parents' footsteps, and they're just doing the best that they can based on the information they have at the time. But now we know more, and
Yeah.
now we have more information about health and nutrition and what we need to be healthy individuals. And with that knowledge that we have now, there's a lot of old misinformation out there that has to be rewritten, and it takes time to do all of that.
Yes, and there are also just so many cultural barriers. I mean, my mom as a child was very supportive of me stopping eating meat. She didn't really care. But my dad, being a hunter, he felt it threatened his manhood. He was, he's machista, and he thought it threatened him as a provider and as a man and as a father. So he was very angry with me when I stopped eating meat, actually. He felt extremely threatened, and I couldn't there was nothing I could do. I apologized to him that I couldn't eat what he killed for me, and eventually he got over it. But that was like a very difficult part of our relationship.
That takes courage to do that. I also felt, nervous about how people would judge me. That kind of held me back from fully going vegan because I knew my family wouldn't want to go vegan. How am I going
Hmm.
to handle going to family gatherings and
Hmm.
restaurants and the comments? And then when I finally started to step into it more, I realized I survived the judgment. I survived the comments. Like I just people people are going to have their reactions and their beliefs, and that's we have that was part of my process, and I think that's the key to navigating these things is people are going to be who they are, but that shouldn't stop you from being who you are. And as long
Exactly.
as you're respectful of other people, and if they're disrespectful of you, then you can find a way to step away from the situation. And there's different ways of navigating those challenges, but that took courage on your part to do that at a young age and be able to stand in that, because I've been vegan for it's coming up on 7 years, and it took me a couple years before fully committing to to work through those barriers within myself, which is why I now created this platform. So I'm so glad that
Right.
you've shared that.
Well, that's
Um,
so funny because I think as an adult, I think it's actually much harder. As a child, I mean, I was 16. I was already rebellious. Was already feeling, that teenage angst of I'm different and, trying to rebel against things anyway. I think it's almost easier when you're at that age to do something that's nonconformist and that's outside of the box and outside of your family. So I actually give a lot of credit to adults who make this decision on their own. It's much harder when you're not feeling that automatic, that I don't know, hormonal rebellion that teenagers feel.
yeah,
So,
and if it's something you believe in,
oh, then it's
that
yeah.
it's yeah, that rebellion. That's a good point. I never thought about that, but yeah, you're right. Teenagers are very rebellious, and when you believe in something so strongly as a teenager,
Yeah, it just sticks. And I almost think it's like it was easier. Like I feel like I had a very easy time becoming vegan and staying vegan because it was at that formative time in my life. I wish everybody would become vegan at 16. I think
me too.
seems like a working method.
That's a good point. Well, it's so great having you on here. I'm really excited to dive into our topic today, which is our microbiome and our gut health, because this is an area, it's starting, more information is coming out, but still there's not as much out there as there really needs to be. Because the way I understand it is our microbiome is like the foundation of all the other health and just balance and well-being that we feel. And so I'm really excited to have this deep dive on these different elements
Sure.
of our microbiome, because you hear stuff and you see little things, but I still don't understand it fully. So I'm excited to have you on here today to share this important information with my viewers.
Yeah,
So
let's talk about it.
yeah, so what is our microbiome?
Oh, good question. I get so kind of, and I'm so involved in this subject, I forget sometimes that this is a term that doesn't really have the same definition for everyone. But in general, a microbiome is just all of the microbes that are present in or on a host. Either this can a rock can have a microbiome. I mean, it's really all of the microbes in and on something. So in terms of humans, we talk about our gut microbiome, our skin microbiome. This is so in terms of the gut microbiome, the microbiome is all of the viruses, bacteria, and microscopic fungi or yeasts that inhabit our guts. They can be good or bad. It's not, the definition isn't dependent on those factors. It's just all of the microscopic organisms living inside of us or on us.
Wow, okay. So that gives me a little bit of a better understanding about what that is. So it's basically it's like the community of microorganisms that are within our body.
Yep. And there are communities of microorganisms everywhere. Like this countertop has a microbiome.
Wow, that yeah, I never even thought about that before. So yeah, thank you for breaking that down. And what role does our microbiome play on our health? And what does an unhealthy microbiome look like?
Okay, those are two great questions. So our gut microbiome, which is what I focus on, but we have a reproductive microbiome.
Hmm.
Um, we have a skin microbiome. We have an oral microbiome. You know, we have a lot of different microbiomes. I tend to focus on gut microbiome because it's so impactful for the rest of our health. Um, so the bacteria and the yeast, and we're not really sure what the viruses kind of do, but so we mostly focus on bacteria and then some Saccharomyces yeast in our bodies. But these bacteria, they aid in digestion, they synthesize vitamins and other nutrients, and they also help regulate our immune system. Those are some of the symbiotic functions of what our bacteria do for us. Um, those are like probably the three most important things. So aiding digestion, creating nutrients that we use, and regulating our immune system.
Okay, great. Yeah, so
Um,
that's a very important those are
those,
all
I mean,
very
yeah,
important functions.
those are really important functions that have nothing to do with, you know, our bodies doing it. These are what the bacteria are doing for us. This is why we allow them, you know, allow, that's an anthropomorphic term, but you know, why they're symbiotic in our bacteria or in our bodies. You know, we have them living in our guts because they do things for us that we really need. And we've co-evolved with bacteria for so long, since the dawn of you know, since the dawn of life on Earth, bacteria have, you know, been around, and since humans have been around, they've been a part of us. So we have this symbiotic relationship where we host them. That's, you know, they're allowed to replicate in our bodies, and we gain nutrients and we gain functions from them. Um, so a healthy versus unhealthy microbiome. This is a really good question. This can be answered in terms of symptoms. So in terms of a healthy microbiome, you feel great. You eat food, you have energy, you digest it, you poop really well, you sleep really well, you get up the next day, you don't really think about your body when you have a healthy microbiome. You just live your life. But an unhealthy biome where you have dysbiosis, feel in that's when you feel digestive issues. You feel bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, chronic syndromes like irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease. All of these are from an imbalance of bacteria in your gut. So what we see when we have an unhealthy microbiome is really that dysbiosis, and it's an imbalance of bacteria that are not helpful outcompeting the bacteria that are helpful to us. And let me tell you a little bit about what good and bad bacteria are. So in our guts, bad bacteria are actually pathogenic or disease-causing bacteria. And normally we don't really have those. Sure, you could get an infection of salmonella or some Clostridium infection or E. coli infection. And that's bad bacteria. That's actually causing disease because of the toxins that they produce. But normally we have bacteria that are either really helpful for us or kind of neutral for us. So our good bacteria, those are the genera Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, and the yeast Saccharomyces, and they're doing things for us. So when we have an abundance of those good bacteria helping us, that's a healthy microbiome. But when that proportion gets out of balance and then we have more bacteria that don't really help us. They may not be harming us, but we have low abundance of those good lactobacillus, bifidobacterium, and a higher abundance of like actinobacteria or just other things that aren't helpful. They're not necessarily disease causing or pathogenic like salmonella is, but they're just not
Mhm.
doing anything for us. That's an unhealthy microbiome. So really a healthy one is just making sure you have an abundance of bacteria that actually provide nutrients, help in digestion, um, and do things for us. Does that make sense?
Yes. So the way I understand it is basically the more good bacteria we have in our bodies, we feel more balanced. And 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 even if we have like the not so good bacteria in our bodies, it's not necessarily going to harm us, but if that starts to like take over, then it's going to
Mm-hmm.
throw off the balance.
Exactly. The bad bacteria, as we say, are just the unhelpful ones. And when there's too many, I mean, they don't do anything for us, and they're out competing the ones that are doing things for us. That's all.
I'm really glad that you are explaining all of these things in a much simplistic way. I'm already feeling like I'm having a better understanding of it.
Good.
And so when it comes to the good and bad bacteria, what are some things that we can do to manage that?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, actually, a lot of people, I'd like to say one point about having gut microbiome tests. It's really popular right now to like send your fecal sample to a company and they analyze your gut microbiome. And that's really helpful and cool and everything. But the solution is always the same. And this answers your question. Eating a whole foods, plant-based, fiber-rich diet is the best thing you can do to support your gut bacteria. So whether you know the slight nuances of what strains or species of bacteria are in your gut and or not, the solution is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
So bacteria basically, if you have some bacteria in your guts that aren't the helpful kind, um, they can produce some toxins, not the type of toxins that like salmonella produce that
Mm-hmm.
make you acutely sick, but they can produce some toxins that are unhealthy for your cells in your intestines, like your lumen.
Mm-hmm.
And this can cause a lot of inflammation. Inflammation is a word that we hear a lot, but you might not really understand what it means. So
I'm
I'll
so
go.
sorry. Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought inflammation up because that was the next thing I was going to ask you about because I've heard that there's a correlation between the two, but I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask about what inflammation is and all of that. So,
Okay, great. So sometimes we have this overgrowth of neutral or, not unhelpful bacteria, and they're producing toxins, they're eating our nutrients, they're not really helpful for us. And because of this, they're damaging the cells in our intestinal cell wall. And this can cause something called leaky gut or inflammation. And it's when nutrients are kind of, or molecules and chemicals are kind of easily permeating the gut wall and going into our blood and then affecting the rest of the cells in our body. So this can cause inflammation if some of the cells in our intestines are being affected by either the bacterial toxins or just too many molecules that aren't supposed to be reaching them. And so an inflammatory response is a natural bodily response to an injury or infection or some sort of irritation. And so when you have those molecules that aren't supposed to be passing easily through the gut or direct damage to those cells, those intestinal cells start sending out chemical messengers called cytokines. And these
hmm.
cytokines attract white blood cells, and they cause vasodilation. So a lot of blood comes to the area and a lot of neutrophils, macrophages, and white blood cells come to the area. And that's why at the site of an inflammatory response, there's a lot of redness, a lot of swelling. And that's what an inflammatory response is. So if this is going on chronically in the gut, it's causing a negative feedback loop all the
Hmm.
time where you have bad bacteria producing, bad bacteria kind of negatively affecting your cells. And then that inflammatory response comes in. It's supposed to be acute. It's supposed to heal your cells and then everything should be fine. But when you have this chronic overabundance of not so good bacteria existing in your gut more than
Mhm.
the good bacteria, you kind of constantly have an inflammatory response, causing more oxidative stress and more damage all the time. It's just a negative feedback loop. So, really, the only way to get the proper nutrients that you need into your body, stop the inflammatory response, is to build those good bacteria up so they outcompete the bad ones.
That's really interesting. Like, because I've experienced inflammation, I've dealt with rosacea for a long time and eczema, and that's what led me to eliminating dairy and my journey to veganism, because I noticed that making those food changes have helped eliminate a lot of
Yes.
that, a lot of those symptoms that I've experienced. But still, there's some like other foods that I'll have that I notice that can sometimes trigger it. And by hearing and understanding this more, it definitely creates more of a visual and an understanding, because you're like, oh, inflammation versus, oh, what's actually happening in my body right now? Oh, I don't like
Right.
the sound of that. And and
Yeah.
and that's interesting. Yeah, so there's this negative feedback loop, and it keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. And so that's understandable then, that because you hear how like inflammation can cause other serious chronic health conditions down the line. So that's
Yes.
understanding, if you keep putting your body through this stress, it sounds like it can only handle that for just so long before it starts going into other areas of having issues.
Mhm. And that's exactly right. And I actually have a theory that people who have dysbiosis and who have had dysbiosis for a long time, because a lot of people grow up, I mean, most like 99% of humans grow up eating meat, dairy, processed food. Um, that dysbiosis starts early in life.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's chronic and ongoing, then people, when they, the body fights too. The body fights really hard to maintain homeostasis. But when it can't anymore, and then people start trying to eat healthy or changing their diet, it's very hard to transition. Unfortunately, it's very hard to transition from a dysbiotic gut to a healthy gut. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of persistence. So what I'm trying to say is, a person with a nice, healthy gut for a long time, you can eat whatever you want. You can eat a dinner of cookies and wine or something, and it won't affect you because your gut microbiome is so stable, so healthy, um, that it will bounce back from that immediately. But a person that has a history of dysbiosis, you can get a healthier microbiome, you can build those good bacteria, but one small hit and those kind of neutral bacteria are like waiting to grow from that hit of like cookies and wine or something and get out of balance again. So building a solid, long lasting gut microbiome, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time. And persistence.
I am so glad you brought that up, because it can be frustrating when you see, why can this person have eat whatever they want and I can't? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now that makes sense, because their microbiome is in a much more balanced state. And I think too, we're always looking for a quick fix, right? It's like,
Always. That's the most
right,
frustrating
whether
thing
it's
about my
a
practice. Yeah.
right, yeah, that's we all want to feel better quickly. We all want to lose weight quickly. We all want it. We want it like yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Right.
it's and that's the challenging part, is embracing the process and looking at it as a lifestyle change.
Exactly.
And and I think too, um, there's that fear of, oh my God, I have to change the way I'm eating. I'm going to feel deprived. Where
Oh.
you
Mm-hmm.
you can't feel deprived. Whole food, plant based. There's so like I follow Forks Over Knives. I go to their website a lot and I get their magazines. And
Yeah.
even though I don't follow whole food, plant based completely, I do try to follow it most of the time, like eliminating the oils, because I notice if I have too much like oily foods, like I'll have an inflammatory response. And so I feel like I know just from my own experiences that it does help me feel better, but you don't feel deprived. And that was part of the appeal also for me stepping into veganism was that there's actually I'm a better cook because I discovered all
Yeah.
these recipes using spices from all these different, all over the world, all these different ethnic cuisines and spices and dishes that I never thought to use or even heard of, and just learning how to cook with all these different spices, and just also learning to make creative desserts with
Yeah.
healthier desserts, and like tofu cheesecake is so much better than the old dairy cheesecake. And I've had non-vegan friends go to a vegan restaurant with me, and we've ordered vegan cheesecake and they've liked it better than the dairy cheesecake, because the dairy cheesecake, it's so heavy, your stomach feels bloated and gross afterwards.
Oof.
Whereas the tofu cheesecake, it's much lighter. It sits in the digestive system
Yeah,
much
you're
differently.
using the food in it rather than
Right.
just feeding the bad bacteria. You're feeding the good bacteria with your cashew cheesecake or tofu cheesecake, and you're feeding the bad bacteria with your refined white sugar dairy cheesecake. Like, I think what it's so much about perspective, like how we
Hmm.
think about food and what we eat. Sure, you're depriving yourself of bloat and gas and low energy. And I mean, that's really how you have to think of deprivation.
That's a good
Um,
way of thinking about it.
yeah, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. Like how you feel when you eat outweighs the temporary satisfaction of eating something that's ultra sweet or like, ultra oily or fried. Um, it's a complete perspective change that you have to have. And when we do make that change, that's the one thing I do in my practice is help my clients change their perspective. It's not
Hmm.
just about changing your diet because you don't want to feel deprived or feel different. But if you just change your perspective, you can go from I'm craving that fried food to ew, I don't want that fried food.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Perspective is everything. Like I'm an emotional eater, and if I'm feeling stressed, I want to eat something. So I change what I would eat. Whereas instead of having, the cookies, like I have healthier versions of cookies I can make that are like oats and canned pumpkin and,
Hmm.
or use smashed banana. If it looks like a cookie and tastes like a cookie, then, it's better. But or I'm happy with an apple with a little sun butter or almond butter. And by slicing up the apple, I have a lot of pieces. So my brain feels like
Right.
I'm eating a lot of something. And if I'm dipping it in like some sun butter or peanut butter or something, it's still taking care of that like feeling of I'm eating something satisfying.
Yeah.
So it's changing, it's just swapping it out. Like I feel like that replacement, swapping it out mindset of how you're looking at it. Cause yeah, when you think about, oh, I'm depriving myself of gas and bloat, ugh. Like
Yeah.
sign me up, please.
Sign me up, exactly.
You know,
Yeah, no,
and
I tell this to people. Like, I think those are great tools, and there's so many tools like that. But I tell, people always ask me, don't you feel deprived that you can't eat, or like, oh, you can't eat that? And I'm like, seriously, how do I explain to you that I don't want to eat that? And that's disgusting to me. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I think too I think the key is planning,
Mhm.
is just a little preparing. And that's how I've been able to navigate when I go to someone's house. If they know I'm like my immediate family and friends, they know I'm vegan. So I just offer, like sometimes they'll make stuff, but I still bring something. I always bring like a main dish, like a casserole or lentil loaf or something that I can share, and some kind of dessert. And this way, I know that I'm covered. It
Mhm.
doesn't make the host have to work too hard. And it gives me an opportunity to share what vegan food really is. And
That's great.
so that's one of the things that I do for preparation. When it comes to meal planning, like there's the Happy Cow app, that's very helpful. And just planning. My husband's not vegan. He's been very supportive, and so we try to find something, either an everything place that's going to have food we all eat, or he'll go to a vegan place with me too. But I think that's the key, is you got to get comfortable with communication, communicating your needs to other people,
Yeah.
and then just doing some planning. And if people can't respect you, you're being respectful, you're conveying what you need. And if people can't be supportive and respectful of that, that's when I tell like the clients I work with that that's when you need to start questioning that relationship,
The company you keep.
your company
Hmm.
you keep, right? Is that really, because that tells you a little bit more, maybe that's not really a real friend or someone you want to spend your life with or whatever the nature of the relationship is.
Yeah.
If someone can't respect your needs, and we all change, right? We're all grow and change. And if someone can't support your growth journey, then that's a different conversation that has nothing to do with being vegan. That's a whole other separate topic
But
there.
related though, actually, very, very related because our relationships with other people hugely impact our behavior and our thoughts.
Yeah.
So this is actually a topic for another time, but hugely related to our diet and our health is our relationships.
Yeah, well, if you ever want to come back and talk about any other
Yeah.
topics, I'd love to have you back. This has been great. And I wanted to just checking here. I know there was some other stuff I wanted to. So, what are some other tips that you have for supporting a healthy microbiome?
Oh, okay. Sure. I can give you lots of tips. Oh, one thing that I was going to say before along the lines of planning is, something this is probably not going to sound good, but bear with me. I love exploiting my clients who hate wasting food because that's a mental I'm the same way. I hate wasting food, right? So if I have them buy a lot of fresh produce or make something healthy ahead of time, like a lot of brown rice, they have to eat it, right? Because they hate wasting food. And so that's one thing that I do with them. I'm like, okay, buy two pineapples, and then they'll have two pineapples at home and maybe they want to choose something else, but they have to eat them before they go bad because they have that psychological I hate wasting food thing. So it's a really fun way that I actually like to exploit that mentality of people. And it's a method and it works.
Oh wow,
Um,
that's actually fun. And it sounds like it's like a fun little challenge that it gives
yeah,
them.
like I call it exploitation, but I mean it kind of is. I'm using that psychology to do something good, to make something work for them.
It's good
Um,
exploitation.
It's yeah, it's the positive form of exploitation.
There you go.
So that's a tip. If you're somebody who hates wasting food, buy produce, make more healthy food, and then you'll want to maybe order a pizza, but then you have all of this brown rice and lentils in the fridge waiting to get eaten, and you have to do it.
That's true. And there's healthier pizzas you can make also that
Yeah,
you can make things taste like pizza that don't have the same junky ingredients either.
exactly. So, the way I like to look, so my main tip for being healthy and getting healthy again is eating fiber. So, a lot of people focus on nutrients, and fiber actually is not nutritive for humans. We don't digest fiber, but who does digest it is our good bacteria. They love it. They eat fiber and they produce vitamin B12, other B vitamins, coenzymes, neurotransmitters.
Mm.
They eat fiber and they produce vitamins and amino acids and other enzymes and nutrients for us. So this is not necessarily a vegan recommendation, but it supports veganism in that fiber only comes from plants. So no matter what your diet is, you have to eat a lot of plants. Eat like a gorilla. And that supports a healthy microbiome. And a healthy microbiome, as you know, supports a healthy brain and a healthy liver and all of your other organs and bodily functions. So fiber is kind of the basis of feeding your healthy bacteria. I cannot stress that enough. And if you can't eat fiber or fibrous foods, that's a problem. And that's something that we have to work with so that you can get there. Because if you can't ever eat fiber because your bacteria, you don't have enough good bacteria to digest it for you, that's a
Hmm.
problem that you have to work on. You should be able to eat cruciferous vegetables and beans and lettuce and cucumbers and raw, raw foods without having diarrhea or gas or bloating or, smelly gas, things like that. And if you're not there yet, we have to take steps to get you there, because those fibers are the only thing, not the only thing, but are the main thing that support those healthy bacteria.
That's a really important point you brought up, because I feel like there's so much focus on protein, 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 but there's all these other nutrients our bodies need. And you hear that, having more fiber is important, but I didn't really fully understand the why
It's not just
behind all that.
important, it's imperative.
It's
It's
imperative, yeah.
absolutely imperative.
Yeah, I feel like there should be more emphasis
Me
and
too.
now that you're sharing this with me, I'm like, this is common sense. We should be no, we should be eating more fiber. And I like what you're bringing up is, and maybe that's why sometimes people feel like, oh, I ate healthy and I still didn't feel good, because there's work that needs to be done to get their microbiome able to do those things. And so
Hmm.
again, I think it emphasizes that there's this quick fix we want. And if we have a microbiome that's not healthy and balanced, it's going to take some time to bring it up to that point.
Yeah, and to keep it at that point. A lot of what I was trying to say before is a lot of people, this is my theory, that have a life history of dysbiosis. You can bring your body to um, a healthy microbiome temporarily, but you have to keep it up. And then the moment you don't, because you splurge or you do whatever, it kind of becomes imbalanced again, and you have to work towards it again. Whereas somebody with a history of a healthy microbiome, it kind of just stays there no matter what you do. And that's unfortunate for the people who, grew up eating a lot of processed food or the SAD diet, the standard American diet. Like it's work that you have to do that maybe somebody else who grew up eating a healthy diet doesn't have to do, but kind of them's the breaks.
Yeah, and I've unfortunately fallen that pattern where I'll do really well and I'm like, oh, I'm good again, and then I'll
Hmm.
go out with some friends, have some wine, or coffee is I can't have too much coffee so I drink mostly tea. Get caffeine through tea. Once in a while I'll have coffee, and then this is what happens. I'll have some coffee and I'm like, oh, I'm okay now. And then I start having it a few days in a row, and then I'll start having like inflammation again. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting how that gives me a little more perspective on just understanding what's going on when that happens.
Yeah, and when that does happen, when you do eat foods that you want but aren't necessarily working for you, there's a lot of ways to mitigate and balance that. So you can have coffee maybe with some other things, or do it in a way
Oh,
that is less hurtful. And that's individual. That's where individualized nutrition coaching comes in too, is that um, you can work with that, and that can probably help you have a little bit more coffee if you want it and still not be so detrimental to your bacteria.
that's good to know. Yeah, it sounds like there's some strategy, and everyone's different. And then that
Yeah.
having this conversation with you today gives me a little more insight on why, again, how certain foods people feel good on and other people don't,
Hmm.
and why, and how everyone's ecosystem within their bodies is so different, that's why it sounds like individualized work is so important, and the work that you're
Exactly.
doing with your clients is really important. Before we wrap up, were there any other tips that you wanted to share on maintaining a healthy microbiome?
No, just that it's very individual. There's a lot of probiotics on the market. It's really hard for consumers to navigate probiotics and, foods that might have probiotics in it, which I think is a really funny topic, due to the viability of bacteria in packaged food. Um, so
Yes,
there's a
I've
lot of,
noticed that's a trend where it's
yeah.
like, you get like cereals now with probiotics.
So, I mean, that's a topic for another day, but that's why like I'm here, and I'm a professional microbiologist, and I actually read the literature. So I read literature and I base my information and what I know and what I teach on scientific research articles. And I'm very good at understanding what they say and understanding which articles are created out of kind of a civic duty, because that's what science is. You know,
Hmm.
we collect data, we come to conclusions, we do analysis, and then we present it to the public. That's our general job. But some scientific articles are actually paid for or funded by the companies kind of trying to produce products. And there's always a conflict of interest statement at the bottom of a scientific article. And so when
Hmm.
I see a conflict of interest statement that says this study was funded by, you know, the company that's trying to produce the product, I just throw it out. I can't afford to wade through that knowledge and decide whether that's information that is believable or not. So
Because
I
it's
only
tainted
read,
information.
yeah, so I only read and validate articles that have no conflict of interest. That's one way that I vet scientific information. Um, so yeah, seek professionals who have that kind of evidence-based understanding for real knowledge, because there is so much information on the internet, and just consumers, I think, get overwhelmed of what should you do. You have all of these different people telling you what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And to be honest, the simplest answer is whole foods plant-based. I mean, that has never changed. There's
Hmm.
slight variations, sure, but I mean, that's the answer to health, is eating like a gorilla. That has not changed for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, and I think that that can help eliminate some of the stress of just so much information. If you start
Yeah,
there and then
start
figure
there.
out the rest, but at least you're starting with something in the right direction while you're figuring out what your unique what your
Exactly.
unique needs
Yes.
are. Before we wrap up today, what are some resources that you would like to recommend for viewers?
Yeah, like I was saying, I think the resources are very hard. I'm kind of biased. I think that reading scientific literature is the best resource. I provide on my website a list of literature that I have vetted and that I find very helpful. Um, and actually, my website has a lot of great information on it. So I have
Okay,
a
great.
blog on there that I update every once in a while. And I have a list of the scientific literature that I have vetted.
Great. So it sounds like your website's a very important resource. So I will definitely include that in the notes below this video. And also, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Through my website, I think
Okay.
you can submit a form and tell me all about yourself, and that comes directly to me, and then we can start a conversation from there. Mhm.
All right. Sounds good.
Microbial future.
What's that?
Microbial future.
Okay,
We're living
cool.
in a microbial future.
Yeah, this was a very it feels like this is something we need to focus on definitely for the for our future. And I really enjoyed our conversation. I learned a lot from you today. It's definitely given me a lot more insight and perspective on my choices and what to do next in taking care of my body. And I hope all of you watching today got some valuable perspective as well. And if you want to connect with Marina, I will leave all of her information in the notes below. And thank you again for having this conversation with me. I hope you come back. I feel like we could talk about so many other layers
Yeah,
to
you and I
this.
definitely could. This has been really fun. I learned a lot from you too, Jennifer. Just like kind of your perspective has been really helpful, I think, in terms of a perspective that a lot of people have, you know, transitioning to being vegan, upholding a healthy diet and healthy lifestyle, and what are the setbacks and what are the kind of tips that you have to do, the slight behavioral changes that you have to do to maintain it. But I would hope that this isn't an identity. Like, I really hope that being vegan and like being healthy can be easy and kind of second nature for you and for me and for everybody. Like, our lives aren't shouldn't revolve around our own health, right? Our lives should revolve around what we how we help others and how we what we produce in the world. Our health should be easy. And I would hope that for you and the other people watching this, to get there is an end goal. to just eat healthy and be healthy and kind of live your life without thinking about the problems that you have physically should be an end goal. And so I'd like to, that's what I try to help people do. And that sounds like what you're also helping people do. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's from different ways. It's changing the way we show up, and
Yeah.
when things don't feel when we feel like we have to shrink down who we are to fit in other people, what other people want from us. That's where a lot of that
Yeah.
discontent happens, because we're not living in alignment to who we are, and when we're not living in alignment to who we are, that throws off the alignment within our body in other ways, because we're stressed, and that's going to impact how we eat and
Hmm.
all those different things. So it is all connected. Yeah,
Very
so
much.
I appreciate that,
Well,
and I appreciate having you here. I hope you come back, and I feel like we could really do a deep dive. This was more of like a general overview, but I feel like we could do more of a deep dive next time on more specific topics. So
let's
this
do
was
that.
great.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.